Miami Hurricanes fans have been asking for weeks, why so many runs up the middle? You got your answer from OC Shannon Dawson, and he got a little feisty.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC and host of Postgame on the Hurricanes Radio Network. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this episode, we'll talk about a possible next verbal commit for Miami in recruiting. It's a big-time Miami target is going to be announcing his destination around 7 p.m. tonight here on Tuesday. If not this one, there are other candidates we will discuss. But let's talk about Miami's running game, Miami's scheme, Miami's offensive coordinator, Shannon Dawson. I like Dawson, and I was actually thoroughly entertained by his answer on this yesterday because, you know, if you guys watch Dawson week to week on his press conferences, like he is by a country mile, like the most laid back, you know, compared to Mario Cristobal, who speaks every week, and Corey Heatherman, the defensive coordinator. Like Dawson's like one of the dudes, but he got a little spicy when answering the question that Miami fans have been asking all season long, running up the middle. Why do you do it so much? Why don't you run to the outside? And I thought Dawson gave a very technical answer, which is, I think, what we should want, right? Because if we truly want to understand why the scheme is playing out this way, this is the type of answer you need. Credit to Gary Furman at Cane Sport for answering the question, or for asking the question here, because, you know, I know this is one that his constituents, our constituents, have been wanting answered. So here's Shannon Dawson explaining Miami's running scheme in the simplest but also, you know, relevant football terms.
And so to me, I don't obsess about that nearly as much as y'all do or our fans do. I don't, because ultimately I understand that, like, when you hand the ball off from the shotgun, most of the time it's going to end up in the A or B gap. It don't matter what run scheme you run. We ran pin and pull 6 times Saturday. It could get outside, but how many times did it? It didn't, because it became a big gap run, because defenses most of the time are going to set the edge to the defense unless they mess up. They messed up a couple times and it spit outside and we got a game. You know, most times it's going to hit in the A or B gap. It doesn't matter what the run game scheme is. You know, counter is going to hit outside sometimes when they wrong shoulder it and the linebacker doesn't fit right. Is that an inside run or an outside run? I'm asking you.
Probably in the eye of the holder.
Well, counter is an inside run,
right,
but it ends up outside sometimes when the defense misfits it. You know what I mean? And so it has everything to do with how the defense fits it. Does that make sense? And so you can run outside zone 15 times, which we probably ran it 10 or so times in the game Saturday. It hit outside 1 time. It hit in the B gap most times. It hit in the A gap a handful of times. You know, like duo, you can run duo 10 times. It's probably going to hit in the A gap 6 of those times. It's probably going to spit to the B gap or backside B gap a handful of times. And there's going to be a couple of times where it falls off the table because they misfit it. You know what I mean? So where the ball hits, you know, I can't, the defense dictates that a lot by how they fit. And we use a lot of things to spit the ball on the edge, which creates edges to defenses, right? To me, that's our stretch game, is getting the ball in the flats, which we do approximately 8 to 10 times a game. And so the question about the ball hitting up the middle, I mean, they can keep asking it and y'all can keep asking it, but I'm not going to change what we're doing, because what we're doing is how we want to play football and how really everybody does.
All right, so that is Miami offensive coordinator Shannon Dawson. Here are my takeaways, and I appreciate him giving a very detailed explanation to that. It's a reminder that within Miami's scheme, within Shannon Dawson's scheme, it's up to the running back to make his read, identify which gap he's going to hit, based on the blocking and based on what the defense is showing him. We did see, and we have seen on occasion, Mark Fletcher hitting the outside on a couple of his runs. I think there was a notable instance, though, in that Stanford game when Fletcher could have hit it to the outside, but he chose to hit the A gap instead. So sometimes that does come down to the running back making that choice. Jordan Lyle hit the outside on the long touchdown that he scored. And I think in terms of hitting more of these to the outside, Jordan Lyle's instincts and explosiveness make him more likely to run to the outside more often once his carries continue to increase. I think we're seeing signs that the Jordan Lyle workload is going to get continually increased after he played a decently sized role in the Stanford game. And then another way to mix it up, which Dawson didn't bring up because he was only commenting on, Miami's conventional offense, not the trickier stuff that they sometimes run, but continue to run more of these end arounds to Malachi Toney that we've seen now on a couple of occasions. Miami's been mixing in more of these lately. We had one of these in the Stanford game. You had one for a 12-yard touchdown in the Louisville game. And then another part of it is, and I know these aren't technically running plays, but when it comes to stretching the field, I think Shannon Dawson views the wide receiver screens as a version of an outside running game. On some of these, Miami has had some success, but notably there have been times these plays have not been executed well due to key blocks being missed. We saw that on a handful of occasions in the Louisville game. So I think that's what we're looking at schematically for Miami. And I think the big message there from Dawson was, what we're doing is not different than what most teams are doing in the country. That's number one. And then number two, he's also telling you we're not going to make any dramatic changes to our scheme between now and the end of the season. In terms of him getting a little spicy and a little bit feisty there, I don't mind it because he probably heard the boos that were happening in the stadium on Saturday. And, people were in the first half booing inside runs at times. I'm sure Shannon Dawson noticed that. I'm also sure he's been asked by, people on the street about this dozens of times throughout the season. And so, it seemed like some of his frustration with those questions boiled up a little bit, but I'm glad he answered it in the most detailed way possible. We'll talk some recruiting when we come back because, there are candidates to be verbal commits maybe as soon as this week. And a quick note, this episode right here is like a bonus because we're going to have a longer episode coming up later on this afternoon with the Truth Teller. It is a Truth Teller Tuesday. Truth Teller and Mark Caesar, former Miami Hurricanes defensive lineman, are going to join us later on today. So we're going to have, another episode today. And if Miami gets a verbal commit tonight, we'll have a third episode. You want to keep it locked right here? We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Guys, the NBA is back, and there is no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Oh, we're also proudly brought to you by Game Time. College football is the absolute best. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually, getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. But that's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. It is the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay on Game Time. If you're going to Dallas for the game this Saturday against SMU, they have tickets starting around, last I checked, around the $100 range. That's a big ticket in Big D. Syracuse game back in Miami the following week, tickets starting around the $20 range. Honestly, it's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other way I've bought tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go! Download the Game Time app today. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen. Make sure for your next listen, you check out Locked On ACC. Kenton Gibbs and I talked about the coaching carousel last night, how that's going to affect the ACC. Will the ACC lose any coaches to any of these openings? Will the Florida State job also come open this year? Locked On ACC is available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. All right, we're going to be on high alert tonight, 7 o'clock. Now, if you guys have noticed the trends the past few years, typically when Miami lands a verbal recruiting commit, 7 o'clock is usually about that time, right? You get around the 6:30 p.m. bat signal, the 7 o'clock commitment. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that timeline plays out because 4-star wide receiver, 6'5.5", 205-pound player out of Walsh Jesuit High School in Stowe, Ohio. Receiver by the name of Milan Paris, named after two of my favorite cities. This young man, former Iowa State commit, decommitted from the Cyclones a couple of months back. Miami's been very much in the mix for Parris. He's going to be announcing a verbal commitment tonight at 7 o'clock. Coming off very, very good visit to Miami this past weekend. Got to visit campus, got to take in the Stanford game. This turns out to be the final visit that Parris makes before making his announcement. And, I'm cautiously optimistic about the way things are trending towards Miami. The other schools that have been in the mix for him since his decommitment from Iowa State, Oklahoma, he did make a game day visit to the Sooners recently, and the Oregon Ducks have very much been in the mix for him. But I did even notice, was reading some of the trends from the Oregon reporters, because I like to also see what the people who cover the other teams are saying about these recruitments. And the Oregon folks seem to think that things are trending in Miami's direction for tonight, which is a really good thing. And man, if Miami can land Parris, this is going to be a big time playmaker and big time target for the future. And the idea of joining him with the likes of Tyron Evans, who Miami already has committed in this class, and Vance Spafford, who is, a really, really talented slot receiver, to be able to bring a group like that in class of 2026 recruiting would be awesome. He had commented to Gabby Urrutia at Inside the U that he kind of sees with the way that Miami uses CJ Daniels, he gets an idea of how he could be used in a Miami offense. And he said he was impressed with the passing game, even though, I guess Miami had said, hey, we didn't, make as many explosive plays as we sometimes do. He still liked what he saw, and he gets an idea of how he can be used in this offense. So hopefully, this is one that trends in Miami's direction tonight. And if it does, we'll have more coverage coming up this evening on Locked On Canes. I mean, another potential candidate to be a next verbal commit for Miami, 3-star defensive lineman Isaiah Broughton, who's a recent UNLV decommit. He's a very, very big guy. He's over 300 pounds, around 6'4". That's a Bruce Warner type of defensive tackle. This is someone else who's given Miami a long, hard look. Came in for a visit this past weekend. Edge rusher out of Buford, Georgia, Dre Quinn, visited Miami this weekend. Tight end Gavin Mueller, who's a Colorado commit, but he's keeping his options open. He's looking around. He visited Miami this past weekend. Oh, and another important recruiting note, I'm sure, we were talking about this on the Locked On Canes Insiders chat. I was talking about this on social media yesterday. A safety, a 4-star safety that Miami has really recruited heavily, is back on the market now. Blake Stewart, who was verbally committed to Clemson, decommitted yesterday, and Stewart is reopening his recruitment. And yeah, Miami is potentially going to be all over that one, because Stewart is a guy. You go back to the shows we were doing spring and summer of last year, Blake Stewart was a big-time Miami target, committed to Clemson. But, Clemson obviously is having a rough year and maybe not the best trajectory right now for that program, so he's reopening his options. So I'm sure Blake Stewart is someone that Miami is going to take a long, hard look at. And then their, LSU verbal commits, Orlando area defensive lineman DeAnthony Lafayette, who's committed to LSU, I'm sure is someone Miami's going to be pushing for since Brian Kelly was fired. And 5-star defensive lineman, top defensive lineman in the country, Lamar Brown, with someone Miami has recruited heavily. Again, these guys are still, and Brown lives in Baton Rouge, so he might stick with LSU no matter who the coach is. We'll see about that. But with Brian Kelly getting fired, you would imagine some of these guys are going to reopen their recruitment and take looks elsewhere. And can you imagine if Miami can find a way to get back into the Lamar Brown sweepstakes? Texas A&M was another one that was right in it for Brown, so they would try to get back in there as well, but so would Miami. So exciting times are happening right now in recruiting. And yeah, we'll be watching later on tonight to see where Milan Paris commits to. Over 6'5", really, really big target. And also, like, if Miami gets that verbal commitment from Milan Paris, Syracuse fans would probably be breathing a sigh of relief, because that would obviously make it less likely that Miami continues to push for a guy like Calvin Russell. So, there are obviously domino effects that happen in recruiting, but Milan Paris, I think the juice is worth the squeeze on this one. This is an excellent, excellent player if Miami can land him. Huge thank you and shout out. And again, we're not done for the day. We're kind of all over the place today, because I'm going to be filling in. I am filling in moments on radio, WQAM 104.3. I'm going to be on from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., filling in for Brendan Tobin. I'll be on with Leroy Horde, former NFL player. So I did early show, and then we're going to do a later show this afternoon with Bruce Warner and Mark Caesar, Truth Teller Tuesday. We'll talk to you later on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.